Pregnancy and giving birth can be scary enough. During the coronavirus, even more so. That's why we're talking with real couples who've been through it to bring you actual experiences and recommendations. I'm John with Fathercraft. Today, my co-founder Paul and I are talking with Kristin and Scott, who gave birth in August of 2020. Well, Kristin did. Scott was there also. We spoke with them a few weeks later. Enjoy.
In Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it was the night after that hurricane came through the East Coast, that level 1 Hurricane Isaias. And so it was just after a full moon, just after a hurricane, this comes into play. At midnight 30, Kristin's like, something's not right. We should call the doctor. And then I committed Dad Cardinal Sin 1. I think it's gonna be fine. Let's see about it in the morning. I think everything's gonna be fine. You know, everything wasn't fine. You should not say that when your wife is in that zone of expecting a baby. So once we got through that, and she's like, I'm gonna call the doctor anyway. And the doctor's like, yeah, meet us at the hospital. Not like, oh my gosh, you're having a baby or whatever. It's like, I'll meet you at the hospital. Let's get this checked out. Because it wasn't like a what she had wasn't a typical symptom. And so at 1:30 in the morning, here we go to the hospital. We're like, well, we're not sure if we're having a baby. Should we bring our baby bag and everything? And she's like, yes. I'm like, are you sure? And so we brought our baby bags, where we put the rest of it together, and we brought them, and we went to the hospital. And then we still weren't sure, but what we noticed is that the hospital was empty at 1:30 in the morning anyway, but it felt even extra empty, which was a good thing. It made us feel comfortable because nobody's around.
Not too much. I mean, it was, I'd say, like, I felt very safe throughout the process. Always had masks on. One of the things that I thought was strange, it's like I don't really know what my doctor's full face looks like because everyone's always wearing a mask. And it was like that in the hospital as well. Like, everyone was very safe. Everybody had masks. They even had extra face shields. And it felt like they were really protecting us and themselves. One thing that we did learn that was a bit different, that sometimes the baby will go to the nursery at night to give the parents a little extra time to sleep and to
You guys
connect.
told us that.
And a lot of friends have warned us. They're like, don't feel guilty. Like, send your baby to the nursery while you can. But actually, during COVID, they're not doing that because they want to keep the baby separate to keep them close to you. But it was strange when we were, once we went to the recovery room, we were there for 3 nights, and I never left the room. So it was kind of like you forget the rest of the world is going on and happening, but you do feel, or I felt, very safe and protected in our little area. So it was.
Yeah. However, although we felt like we were in our own bubble and the hospital was all ours, apparently because of the full moon, the nurse casually mentioned that because of the full moon and the pressure changes of the hurricane, a lot of babies were born in that hospital that night. And had we come, an hour earlier, they would have diverted us to a different hospital because they had that many babies taking up their capacity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then I saw one monitor, and there was 8 delivery rooms, and there was 8 little heartbeats going, when I passed by.
Wow.
So it was a big night for, deliveries, but we felt like we were all alone.
I feel like it's been pretty consistent. Even now, say, going to the pediatrician's office, it's really nice that the pediatrician has, our pediatrician actually has 2 different offices. In one, they're only seeing well patients.
Okay.
And it's very segmented. You come in here, they check our temperatures, they check the baby's temperatures, they ask you the questions, which is good. But even now at the pediatrician, until the baby is 1 month, they're allowing both parents to come, which is really nice because I feel like you need both of us to remember what's being said as you're sleep deprived and there's a lot of information coming at you. But I say it's been pretty good, and it's been, we've felt safe along the way. I think, as challenging as some of the rules are, that it's for the best interest of you and the baby and the other people around you. I'd say the one thing that was probably actually hardest on our parents, Harper's grandparents, is that in the hospital, after we delivered the baby, there's no visitors. And actually, in speaking to some other friends, it's almost in a way a strange blessing because I hear that it's so There's so much going on. There's so much for you to get used to. In a way, it's kind of nice just to have that time for you as your immediate family, the mom, the dad, and the baby, to bond. And as much as we want to introduce her to everybody, it was nice just to be able to focus on ourselves.
The extra time, made me feel more authoritative about Harper when introducing her to her grandparents. Like, oh, that's an okay cry. Oh, that sounds like we need a diaper change. And then I felt like a pro dad, like had they come to the hospital, I was like, I don't know, not being able to be there. It was really important to Kristin and I to be there. So, I took a whole bunch of extra time to make sure I came back from overseas early. And good thing I did, because if I came when I was originally planned, it wouldn't have worked out. So being able to be there, being able to be as close to the experience as possible, it was especially like, Kristin's like, you got to be there. So the fact that they let me into the operating room still, and they let me sit with her almost the entire time, was big, because that was what I was mostly worried about. However, it's still possible. In fact, when we checked in, they gave her a COVID test, but they did not test me, because they said, if she's got it, you probably got it. And that was their reasoning. Room service. I don't know if this is like what they do in hospitals now, but you have a menu and you call and they bring it to you. That was great.
Not since this was our first time having a baby, we don't have too much to compare it to. But I'd say overall it seemed like a very safe, a very clean experience. Every time a nurse or a doctor would come in, they were constantly washing their hands, changing gloves. They were fully covered in PPE, and they had on traditional masks and face shields, and it just felt very safe. And I think at first, thinking through of what was to come when we were going to have the baby, I was always very concerned that, maybe we would contract COVID from being in the hospital. But once I was at the hospital, I didn't have that fear or that worry. I think it seemed like they were taking all the precautions, and knowing that I had been tested, and then the theory that if I had it, my husband would have it, and knowing that everybody else who came in was being tested as well, I think that helped reinforce the sense of security that we had.
And I actually had a slightly different concern about the sterility of the environment, that, you're already in a hospital and it feels very sterile. And, having the warm approach of the baby nurses is kind of important. And you guys said it on your video, you haven't met a baby nurse that wasn't helpful and warm, etc. And so despite having all these layers of protective equipment, the natural just helpfulness and warmness of the nurses still came through. So that the providers were very patient with us and answered all our questions, probably like the 10th time that day. And we're very, just warm with the baby and demonstrating how to do everything. So that really came through as well. I was a little bit worried that I would just feel like a very impersonal environment because of the precautions.
I'd say, if anything, I was a bit more nervous about the experience than what actually happened. So I'd say that going through the experience, it made me a bit more comfortable, and I think that's also a testament to, as the time's gone on since COVID started, the hospitals have been able to adapt their ways to help parents feel a bit more at ease.
The scary part came so fast that it was almost over, and then we're recovering, and that was a lot more comfortable. Because in our case, we weren't sure until we asked them that we were having the baby. Remember, I was still kind of like, all right, well, we have some abnormal symptom. They're going to check us out, give us some advice. I'm sure it's going to be okay. And then they're taking her COVID test and everything. It's like, wait, are we having a baby today? And they're like, yeah, in about an hour. We're like, oh. And then it seemed to go fast forward, and then we're in the recovery room, and they hand us the baby, and then, emotions and love and everything.
Your fears and your concerns are valid, but I would say it's really important to trust the healthcare providers, that they are looking out for the best for you and your child. That if I think, as Scott mentioned, I think our concerns were a bit more in the process and the unexpectedness. So I think in the moment, our COVID fears were subsided a little bit, just because of everything else that was going on. But in a way, I think that was helpful, because as much as we thought we had to worry about that, it wasn't as scary as an issue once we got there and we saw how careful everyone was and everyone was being. And I think that kind of carried over from the prenatal care I received to the hospital visits to the pediatric care that we're now undergoing for the baby, that it seems like all three touch points, the doctors and the facilities are really putting in a lot of consistent effort. And I think that was one of your points that you brought up, is it seems like, yes, the policies and the things that we've been hearing from all doctors at all three touch points has been consistent, which has also been really reassuring to know that we're in good hands and that everyone's looking out for the parents and the baby to make sure that we're safe.
Yeah, and I would add, since the pandemic's been going on for several months now, they're more practiced than ever, so they have a system down at the healthcare. So to echo what Kristin said, they've got you in their best interest. They've got a system down now, so they're doing a good job, it seems. And then I'll add, it's not too early to prepare to get that go bag ready, and trust your wife. Right at 2 weeks, so right at that COVID threshold for social isolation.
So I'd actually say that my husband had more pregnancy cravings than I did. And I'd say it was funny, since we were distanced for 20 weeks of the pregnancy. We would be talking and he'd be craving something, or, he'd say, you'd be reading books and different things of what to be expecting at this week in your pregnancy. And my husband would have those symptoms, even more than I would sometimes. So I think, despite our distance, we were still very connected throughout the process. Thankfully, I didn't have too many cravings, but I will tell you one story. When I came back to the U.S. in about March or April, just as COVID was really picking up, I tried going to Whole Foods one day because I needed water or something fresh. And I decided I was going to go early in the morning during the hours of when, senior citizens or pregnant people could go. But I got up to the door and I was in line and people were looking at me weird. I'm like, why are you here? And I get to the door and I was like, I'm pregnant. That's why I want to come in. And they said, well, you don't look pregnant. And because I was told I didn't look pregnant, the people around me were kind of shaming me for being there. And I was like, I'm not going to lie about this. I wouldn't try to use this to my advantage. But it's interesting the way that, people are kind of perceiving who was able to take advantage of different times and things.
I'll say that I thought, I was like, so talking to my friends who had kids, like, what do you do? It's like, well, you don't do anything. I mean, they sleep all the time. I was like, so if they're sleeping all the time, then you're going to have a lot of time still, right? Except for you're probably not at work, so you're going to have a lot of time to do things. And that's not how it works.
I'd actually say during COVID, in a way, it's been helpful because it's forced us all to stay at home and slow down a bit. For example, while I was pregnant, it's never like we were going out to dinner and, I was not able to have a drink or do something and felt left out because we weren't really doing that. So in a sense, it's kind of like everybody's had to hibernate and be pregnant and stay at home with a newborn like us. So I'd say in that sense, it's been nice. It's allowed us to kick back and relax and slow down a bit throughout the pregnancy and now. But it's definitely, we wish more people could come and visit and meet her. There's been a lot of Zoom and FaceTimes and virtual introductions of the baby, so hopefully she doesn't get too familiar with a screen in her face already. But, in a way it's kind of been nice because we've been used to this more sedentary lifestyle. But yes, we want to get her out a bit. We are living in an apartment hotel style, so I'm constantly covering her with a blanket and calling that her COVID mask, since I know we can't put a mask on the baby, but I do have concern that, at times COVID could, be anywhere. But I'd like to get her outside and walk around and just enjoy the slower pace of life. So it's been, I think we've had to set our expectations. I think we've definitely followed some of the recommendations that you all gave, and well before Harper was born, we made sure that our family and those who we knew would see her immediately have had their Tdap vaccines and are up to date on their vaccinations. And then we've really asked our family to make sure that they're not going anywhere the 2 weeks before they came to visit, that they're, being very mindful of their surroundings and what they're doing. And then also my parents did wear a mask when they met the baby and were around, just to be extra precautious. And that's kind of what we're doing. You know, we've met a couple friends outside from a distance, see the baby from afar, but, you know, being mindful of who's holding her and who's getting very close, just because it's trying to do what we're comfortable with, but also keeping her and us safe is important.
You know, with friends, it's becoming more the norm, so it doesn't feel quite as weird. So some friends of ours gave us some baby stuff yesterday, and they wanted to see the baby, so we drove over there, and we stood from our distances, and it felt normal because we've been doing that so long. So, you know, things are, you know, you have to think about it a little bit up front, but it doesn't feel too awkward anymore. I mean, there's still going to be some residual there, but it's getting easier.
But it would still be nice to have the extra hands to hold the baby. But thankfully, we've got our great devices and gadgets that you all have recommended.
It's doable. I know that, you know, every parent's thinking like, this is not the time I would have chosen to have a child. But there's still pros. Of course, there are cons. It's perfectly doable, and it can be pretty safe and event-free, and we're still having a great time.
I'd say that, you know, there's definitely pros and cons. I think that I wish I had taken advantage of the, you know, when COVID first set in and when I was pregnant, the ability that it almost allowed me to slow down. Working remote, I think, is an extreme luxury that most pregnant women wish they had all throughout their pregnancy. I'd say, you know, silver lining, it definitely helped with not needing to buy as many maternity clothes. It was a lot easier to get around. But I'd also say in that vein, I felt like I missed out on the opportunity of, you know, taking more photos, and we didn't really have a chance to have a baby moon. And so it's really important, I'd say, to make sure that you weave in those milestones that you feel that you would typically have, but try to figure out how to adapt them to work for you at the time. And I'd say, yeah, definitely remember to kind of slow down and take advantage of the way that COVID has changed our lives a little bit. But I'd say also that it's been really nice to see some of the creativity. So, for example, we've had some virtual showers or more drive-by showers. And actually, in that sense, it was kind of nice because people would come and we'd actually spend 10 minutes or so with them versus so many people at once. So I'd say it's been really fun to see the creativity that people and our friends and our family have bestowed upon us during this time. And it's just been really nice to still feel like we have support during all of this when we can't necessarily all be physically connected.
That's it for our conversation with Kristin and Scott. Be sure to subscribe for more videos, including our conversation with another couple, Sam and Anna, and also our conversation with pediatrician Dr. Jacquelinne Winkelmann. All right, see you around.